Well, good morning. This is Thomas Stith. I'm the District Director for the U.S. Small Business Administration, and I wanted to thank NCGrowth for sponsoring the event this morning. I have my colleague, Patrick Rodriguez, who is the Senior Area Manager here in North Carolina, that will provide a presentation on our Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. First, before we get started, I just wanted to say there are over 900,000 small businesses in North Carolina employing 1.7 million people. And SBA realizes that these businesses create opportunities in our communities throughout North Carolina. So we are very engaged in this recovery effort as we go through what has been designated as disaster in all 100 North Carolina counties. Patrick is going to detail the current response, our Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. SBA also has an Express Bridge Loan Program, which is typically targeted toward existing SBA clients, and those are bridge loans that you can secure from your current lender. Many of you are aware that there is current legislation before Congress that will provide additional substantive resources to businesses all throughout this country and in North Carolina. We won't speak to that today because that is still being finalized. And so Patrick is going to talk specifically about the current initiative that SBA has that is focused on small businesses throughout North Carolina to provide an economic infusion into our communities. So Patrick, I'll let you take over, and we'll certainly leave room for questions and answers later.
Thank you, Thomas. Appreciate that. And like you said, we're just going to be focusing on the Economic Injury Disaster Loan at this time. And at the end, we'll have an idea of who's eligible, how to apply, the process, and the loan terms. And we'll handle Q&A at the end. So let's get started. So as you know, the disaster declaration is currently out for and available for North Carolina businesses. So that would include all 100 counties in North Carolina who are eligible for SBA disaster loans. That's true for most of the country as well at this time, but for our sake today, we'll focus on North Carolina. We are encouraging everyone to apply, all small businesses and nonprofits who are eligible. We are encouraging to apply for the SBA disaster loan. We would love to have folks be there in the queue and have that ability to draw down those funds and have those capital infusions available to your small business as soon as possible, and not wait for times to get tough, or more tough, I should say, and have that capital available to your small business. Those funds are currently are in the SBA's authorization. There was $50 billion, billion with the B, allocated to the SBA over the last appropriation cycle. And that was meant for disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, and now, of course, we have the coronavirus, which is affecting the U.S. economy. So those funds were passed and on the books at SBA for the last appropriation cycle and currently available. So here are some of the businesses who are eligible to apply. We're talking most small businesses, small agricultural cooperatives, small aquacultural businesses, and most private nonprofit organizations. So I really want to highlight the last piece of that, and that's private nonprofit organizations. So normally during SBA lending, normal SBA 7A lending, nonprofits are not eligible for SBA normal loans. But during times of disaster, the disaster loans are available to nonprofits, including churches, daycares, senior centers, and associations, and we'll go into some of those later, but I just wanted to highlight that private nonprofits are also eligible. So if you're a business, our nonprofit's been affected by the disaster economically, less customers coming through your doors, or the sector that you're in's been affected indirectly. The industry's been affected indirectly. You can think of all the tourism, hotels, motels, restaurants, educational related businesses that have been affected. You would be eligible to apply for an SBA disaster loan. And if you're wondering, am I eligible? I do this, and my business is on some type of, maybe at the bubble, or maybe you're not sure you're eligible. We're urging everyone to apply, and let the SBA notify you if you're not eligible. That way, at least you're in the queue and you have a response back from the SBA. So the criteria, what's the criteria for an SBA disaster loan? Well, applicants must have a credit history acceptable to the SBA, but I'll put kind of a caveat on that, is that we are being very lenient when it comes to the credit review. And in addition, SBA has waived the credit elsewhere test. So you don't have to be declined by a bank in order to apply for an SBA disaster loan. So that's very important to know. SBA must determine that the applicant business has ability to repay. And in just normal terms, what they're saying is that you should have something to show the SBA that in 2018, 2019, that you had existing cash flow pre-crisis to help the SBA determine what your revenue was, and then look at your schedule of liabilities to come up with a number that's out there for your small business. So you want to make sure you're telling your complete narrative on your revenue for 18 and 19, and then also lay out your schedule of liabilities, and that will help the SBA determine the loan amount that we'll be offering. So also, you must be physically located in the disaster area. It's not as important this time around because the whole country has mostly been declared a disaster territory, but in times of hurricanes and things like that, that is more of an important factor in the SBA disaster loan program. How much can a business borrow? So up to $2 million is the max. The interest rates are set by Congress during the authorization last year. The interest rate is 3.75% for small businesses and 2.75% for nonprofit organizations, with the term up to 30 years. So when they offer you the SBA disaster loan, they'll have a term associated with it. It may be 15, maybe 20, maybe 25, maybe 30. But the goal is to not put a significant debt load on your business while you're repaying the disaster loan. But if it were to be a small amount and 30 years was just kind of at the outer edge of those, the minimum payment for the SBA disaster loan program is $50. So they may come up with the term that's 15 or 20 years to meet that requirement. Obviously, the eligibility is going to be based on your size, the industry you're in, and your financial resources. And we are not a collateral-based lender like a traditional bank. These are primarily cash flow loans pre-crisis that we're determining your capital needs with. How can you use a loan fund? So this is really important because a lot of folks are worrying about payroll. So you can use an SBA disaster loan to pay your payroll, pay yourself, sole proprietors, folks that work from home, all those employees and folks that are independent business owners would be able to use a disaster loan to pay payroll, pay fixed debts, accounts payable, and then other bills, right, that you have that are not being paid or having problems being paid during this crisis, during this declared disaster. But just to let you know that the disaster loan is not intended to replace lost sales or profits and expansion or to refinance existing debt. So what that means is that I had a big potential sale of a big, large asset, a tractor or something, scheduled for March. It didn't go through. That's not, the SBA disaster loan is not meant to make up for that lost sale. But if in 2018 or 19 you had some revenues similar to that, that will figure into the equation on your overall cash flow needs. And along with your schedule of debts, that will enter into the equation as far as your previous revenue, but it's not going to replace lost profits or lost sales. So the collateral requirements. So like I said earlier, SBA is not a collateral lender per se during times of disaster. We're really more looking at your pre-existing cash flow prior to the declared disaster. Anything under $25,000 does not require collateral. And but the SBA, if there's collateral available, will ask for those business owners to pledge that collateral. Business assets being first, personal assets being second. That being said, if there's no collateral available, I'm an IT company and I just don't have collateral. I don't have assets. Everything's on the cloud. I rent server space. I work from home. I'm an online business. There's just no collateral there. That will not be a means for denial. Lack of collateral will not be a reason solely for a SBA disaster loan denial. So, what kind of small businesses can apply? You name it, basically out there: hotels, motels, bed and breakfasts, recreational facilities, boats, charter boats, manufacturers, construction companies, owners of rental property. So that's a big piece of the puzzle right there. I've had a lot of questions on that. Restaurants, there's many retailers across North Carolina who are suffering from this would be eligible. Obviously, travel agencies are suffering. They would be eligible. And in the educational industry as well, folks that work with students, folks who work with universities, all those industries and small businesses are suffering. They would be eligible, and wholesalers as well. Like we said earlier, this isn't as important during this declared disaster, but when you sign into the portal to apply online, you're going to see that you're going to apply through the state. So you're going to look at the state that's declared a disaster area. You'll scroll down to North Carolina. You'll select North Carolina. It'll bring up a list of counties. You'll select the county, and then you'll go into the application process. So you must have a physical presence in that county. That being said, if I'm an online business, right, I don't necessarily have a physical brick and mortar location, but my office, I do business in the state of North Carolina, and with the Secretary of State's office, or through my tax returns, there's an actual physical address listed in the state of North Carolina that would qualify you to apply. So let's see. So as I said earlier, the funds do not come as a normal SBA loans would come through a third-party lender. SBA disaster loans come directly from the SBA and through the U.S. Treasury. So these are the long terms. This is why we're able to offer the 30-year term, and those are true 30-year terms. They're not. They're amortized over 30 years. There's no balloon payment or anything associated with a disaster loan. So 30 years is 30 years. Hopefully keeping those loans low, those loan payments low, to not impede your normal cash flow when you're during recovery. We're urging everybody to go through the disasterloan.sba.gov website. It has been revamped over the last 24 hours. It's up and running. And if, for instance, you were there on the website a day ago, or maybe even just yesterday, and it was down for maintenance or was overloaded, we're urging everybody to clear the cache on their computer, and that will help. That will allow you to then go into the application as a loan applicant. Clearing that cache will help get that loan application up on your computer. And we're also urging folks to look to the Microsoft Explorer, Microsoft Edge, or Firefox browsers to apply online. For whatever reason, the coding on the application does not work nicely with Chrome. So we're urging people to use Edge, Explorer, and Firefox, and not Chrome during the application process. It could be a little glitchy. There is no cost to apply. So this is meant for times of economic distress. There's no obligation to take the loan. So let's say you apply, you are offered $200,000. You could have that in the queue waiting for you, and let's say in a month from now you think, oh, I may need that, and you could draw down the funds. And let's say you draw down the funds and you never need it, but it's sitting on your balance sheet. Well, at the end of the disaster, or I think the loan payments normally start in 5 months from the time of disbursement, but those can be extended up to 12 months. So effectively, you could have a cash infusion into your business of X amount of dollars sitting on your balance sheet with no principal and interest payments for 5 months. And it being there just kind of offers business owners peace of mind who are weathering this storm right now. The maximum unsecured amount, as I mentioned earlier, is $25,000, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. And for those small businesses that have disaster loans currently, a lot of folks on the coast, being Hurricane Alley there, they have a disaster loan already. Applying for another disaster loan is available to them. There's not a maximum amount that they can borrow through the SBA disaster loan program.
Patrick, I don't want to interrupt your presentation, but just on that part, and I know things are changing daily, on this particular economic injury disaster loan, deferment of payments are automatic for a year, so there is no repayment on fee or interest for a year.
That's great to know, and that's for this disaster and for existing disaster loans that you may have on your books already. If you took out an SBA loan prior to this, and let's say you had a 7(a) SBA loan for construction of a building, and it was at the $5 million limit, which is the maximum limit for SBA to any one individual, you could still apply for an SBA disaster loan on top of that. The normal cap does not apply to the disaster loan program. Okay, so we're going to talk about some filing requirements, and we're going to get just in a little bit into the weeds here regarding the application itself. Like I said, we're encouraging applicants to use the website to apply, and these forms will be populated in the online application. Form 5 in the application is meant for corporate entities such as partnerships, corporations, LLCs, LLPs, those types, S-corps, and you'll be guided to that form by selecting those types of entities. And under applicant's legal name, in that section, you're going to want to put your business legal name in that form, not your individual name in that form. So under the Form 5, you're basically talking about your corporate entity, and you're putting your corporate entity's legal name. And under Federal Tax ID, you'll be supplying them with your EIN. And the next box, which is box 5, is your trade name. And we're encouraging folks to not put any trade name in that box, just so it doesn't confuse the application process. you can leave that blank. For those sole proprietors out there, a lot of folks are in the gig economy. You're going to use Form 5C, and you will be putting your individual name there, first, middle, last, for instance, and your Social Security number. So those are the two separate forms that you'll be filling out online, and it'll walk you through the process depending on what box you click. So as of now, we've been told that for anything under 500,000 in revenue, you do not need to supply your tax returns to the SBA. So just keep that in mind. If you have them, let's say you have 2019s, you were fortunate enough to get them in before this happened, and if you want to submit them, please do. If you only have your 2018s completed, you can submit those. Both of them would be fine for application purposes. And the one thing I do want to stress, though, in the filing requirements is that IRS Form 4506T is required. So that's going to give the SBA permission to go to the IRS and get your tax returns directly from the IRS if needed. So that's a really important piece of the puzzle. As you're filling out your form, you'll come across this requirement and know that it's vital that you fill it out, sign it, and return it back to the SBA through the loan portal. If there are multiple owners, so for instance, you have a spouse or a business partner as part of your business, and let's say it's 50, 40, 10 ownership structure. In that application, you're going to say owner 1, 50%, owner 2, 40%, and you'll have a box to fill that in. Owner 3, 10%. And at the end of that form, it must equal 100. It's got to equal 100 or else it's going to get kicked back to you. So if there's a silent partner that's never made a decision in the company ever, and they're a 5% owner or 2% owner, they have to be accounted for as well in order for the process to go through. Like I said earlier, anything under 500,000, the income tax returns are not necessary, but if you'd like, you can submit them. As I mentioned earlier, the schedule of liabilities is SBA Form 2202. That will be in there as well digitally. And that's where you're going to list your debts, payroll, accounts payable, and any other bills that your business has incurred or will incur over the next 6 months to 9 months. And those are going to enter into the calculation for SBA on how much the loan amount will be. So unlike a traditional loan, you're not going to fill out a box that says I'm requesting $100,000. There's not going to be a place in the application to put the amount that you're looking for. SBA is going to take your revenue, it's going to run it through a calculator, combine it with your debts, your payroll, accounts payable, and other bills, and it's going to come up with a number. And that number is going to be hopefully adequate to keep your business running and have you continue your operations for the next 6 to 9 months. So that being said, there is space within the application under other information and in a narrative section where your financials are, where you can state a ballpark figure that you would like to see. So if you've done calculations or you know that by, you need X amount of dollars to get through the next 6 to 9 months or the end of the year, you can put that ballpark figure in there and then justify it with a couple of your assumptions to help the loan processor understand that this is the amount you're looking for, and that might help your overall loan amount reach that amount if it's not already at that amount. You'll also have to submit personal financial statement. Okay, I'm not going to go into this slide too much, but they may come back to you, the SBA Loan Processing Center may come back to you and they may ask for additional information. Please monitor your emails during this time. Check your spam folder. If you do not return and reply back within 7 days of them sending you an inquiry, your SBA loan application will be withdrawn. So that's very important to know that if you get an email and you don't reply back within 7 days, they're going to withdraw it and you're going to have to start all over. And just be mindful that there's a lot of scams going around. Make sure that you're getting email from a .gov domain and that you're putting information into a .gov domain. There are some scams out there, and we don't want you to get into that mess. This is a really important slide because under disaster declarations, SBA can lend directly to nonprofits. Those would include nursing homes, food kitchens, museums, educational facilities, senior centers, daycare centers, playhouses, community centers, shelters, rescue organizations, associations, churches. Those are all eligible for disaster loans. So in order to be eligible, they have to have a designation from the IRS as being a 501c, 501d, or 501e. Those are really important to find out if you're applying for a disaster loan and you're applying as a nonprofit. There's also some forms I'll show you in a minute that you would want to send in that are a little bit different than a for-profit business. Here they are. So you want to include these forms. I'm not going to go into it. It's being recorded, so you can go back and take a look at this slide. But there are some forms that are necessary for nonprofits that for-profit companies do not have to submit. So take a look at that on review. Here are some ineligible entities. So if you're a large agricultural enterprise, you're not going to be eligible. If you're a religious organization that does not have an IRS designation 501c, D, or E, you will not be eligible. Normally churches, your local churches are normally 501c, D, or E's. Those would all be eligible, but not all religious organizations are classified as that. Charitable organizations, i.e. foundations, those would not be eligible. Large foundations would not be eligible. Businesses considered hobbies, meaning that I have a business, but I don't report the income necessarily on my taxes, and maybe it's below, $11,000, but it's not being reported necessarily to the IRS. So SBA would have a hard time determining what the loss is there in previous years, and would not be able to judge any economic loss because there would be nothing to judge it against or compare it against. Any government-owned concerns would not be eligible, obviously. Gambling businesses that derive more than 1/3 of their revenue, gross revenue, from legal gambling activities. That's not really prevalent in this part of the country, but there are casinos and gambling halls and different types of machines throughout the state that folks can gamble at, and establishments that people can gamble at that would not be eligible under those conditions. Obviously, casinos and racetracks would fall under that ineligible category. And then also speculative real estate would not be eligible for this. But if you are a landlord who has tenants who are moving out, public housing, condos, those types of landlords arrangements, they would be eligible. So, like I said, how to apply. This is really important. So you want to go to the disasterloan.sba.gov/ELA website. It's up and running. Like I mentioned earlier, use those browsers I mentioned. Clear your cache if you were on there before. And if need be, you can always go to the sba.gov/disaster website, download all the hard forms, the hard copy forms, fill them out, have them ready, and then as you're filling out your online application, you can just transfer that information over into the digital form, maybe help you get the necessary paperwork and financial statements in order before you go online. And if you have a question on your form, let's say you submit it this week, next week you want to check in, we're recommending people call the 1-800 number 659-2955 to check in on your loan application. You will have a number associated with your loan application, so make sure you write your loan application number down, have it ready. Also, make sure you write down your password and username for the portal. SBA cannot reset your password if it is lost. So make sure you're writing down your username and password and having that available to you in case you need it. And also, the disaster customer service at sba.gov is an email where you can send questions to. Always include your application number in any email in the subject line so they can track your inquiry. So in case those are, we have a lot of rural communities in North Carolina and the bandwidth is not great. So if you're in a community with low bandwidth online and you need to fax your application in, we have a fax number available, 202-481-1505, or you can print them out and mail them to the processing center in Fort Worth with the address right below there. Those are places you can also, and if you needed to, you could also print them out, scan them if you had the ability, and also then email them to ela.doc@sba.gov. And they make sure you include your application or first name, last name, or your corporate name in the subject line. Okay, so here I'm just going to kind of wrap up here. I think this is one of the couple last slides here. We are always indebted to our partners and all the work they do throughout the year in normal economic times, helping us provide mentoring, technical assistance, loan processing, or loan packaging, I should say. And we're all rowing in the same direction. You can go to sba.gov, click on local assistance, and put in your zip code, and it'll come up with a list and a Google map of all the local resource partners who are available to help you put your SBA disaster loan package together. Here are some of the websites for those organizations. The sbtdc.org has a specific coronavirus page up right now. You can apply online for assistance, and all the assistance that we're providing is, of course, paid for through your tax dollars, and is now virtual. Unfortunately, all the locations are now providing, fortunately or unfortunately, they're providing all counseling and mentoring virtually, either through a web platform or over the phone. So there's SCORE, who are volunteers who are helping throughout the country. Here locally, we have the Veterans Outreach Center helping as well, which is based out of Fayetteville, helping throughout the state. And then we have 4 women's business centers who are assisting small businesses and nonprofits apply for the disaster loan. And please reach out to these organizations. SBA, obviously, we may or may not have the bandwidth to help everyone directly. And during normal times, we rely on our partners to do the majority of one-on-one mentoring. And during this time, we're also relying on them for one-on-one assistance with your loan applications. We're urging everyone to apply as soon as possible. The sooner you get it in, of course, maybe the sooner you'll be approved and have it in the queue waiting for you. The disaster declaration began January 31st, 2020, and as of today, it ends December 18th, 2020, so you can apply up until December 18th, 2020. That date may be pushed back other times and other disasters, hurricanes, etc. Those dates have been pushed back, but for now, December 18th is the final day to apply, December 18th, 2020. But we encourage everyone to apply as soon as possible. What else? If you're needing, so let's say the SBA comes back with a number and you're like, well, I don't need that much. you can always take less. And let's say you think you need more, you can always plead your case and ask for additional funding, or come back to them after a certain amount of months and ask for additional funding. And if you're denied, you're given up to 6 months to provide new information and submit a written request for reconsideration. We would urge people to not wait 6 months, but to reapply right away. So with that, I will leave it for questions. I know we've covered a lot of territory, and I'll leave the rest of the time for Thomas and I to do Q&A.
Thank you, Patrick. And just to reemphasize, and again, appreciate NC Growth hosting the meeting today. Things are changing literally hourly at times. And so we will be glad to come back and have further discussions. And just to recap what Patrick said, I know a lot of information at one time, but if your takeaways, the economic injury disaster loans provides up to $2 million worth of loans to economically injured companies. You have a 30-year payback, 3.75% for businesses, 2.75% for nonprofits. We have numerous partners across the state to assist you. SBTDC in particular is very familiar with disaster recovery. They can assist in helping you prepare your applications. And once again, be very mindful of evolving events. The current CARES Act, which we did not and won't talk about until it was actually approved, has significant support for small businesses across the country, obviously, but it will be extremely helpful for those businesses in North Carolina. So I encourage you to pay attention to what is part of the CARES Act, and we will, as I said, be glad to come back to talk about that in more detail once that legislation is official.